Good morning on my side, but afternoon to you, Laura. How are you this afternoon?
I'm good, thanks, Michael. And how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited. I have a little of a brief bio that I'm gonna start out with. Just to give everyone a little bit of a background about Laura, you competed 4 years in track and field at the college levels while receiving your degree in exercise science. You've worked with the highest level sports people in the industries with the NFL, MLB, NHL, and now you're embarking and continuing on your successful business, Start Strong, which by the way, I love your last name. I'm not sure if you married into that last name, but different, different
Briefly.
conversation. Um, and so now you work with dedicated athletes on speed and development and injury prevention training, among other services. And your mission, actually, Laura, stood out to me. And I like the word that you used before athlete, and it said dedicated. So my first question actually is, in your words and in your vision, what does a dedicated athlete look like?
Nice. Okay. It's someone who's open and allows someone to help them. So
Mm,
from my view, especially as, in the private sector, as opposed to a team coach, which is a little bit more rigid, they have to allow me to help them. So if somebody, for example, if the parent wants it, but the athlete doesn't, that's not a good fit for me. I can't help that athlete. I might be able to help them a little bit, but that
mm,
athlete doesn't want it. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm not saying that the
mhm.
athlete is wrong. I'm saying I'm not the good fit for them. So a dedicated athlete is mostly someone who is open, wants to learn, receptive, and willing to take action from that.
Wow, I love that. That's awesome. I had a feeling when I read your whole mission and just I went through all your website material and your content. I was just like, I know that there's something behind that word dedicated. So that's awesome.
Good little peek there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What have you found to be some of the challenges that athletes face when they decide that they want to improve on their physical aspects of their performance?
Are you speaking specifically from like entering our program, maybe?
Yeah, what do they face when someone says, "I want to really improve on my, performance
Mhm.
physically"? What have you seen within your program that maybe they struggle with, maybe with adapting to, or like what is it you see that is like a hurdle, like that's
Okay.
very common?
Yeah, the most common one for everyone would be we're very specific about how you move. We're very
Mm,
slow down, focus on details, pay attention, speak our language, and we're gonna be focusing on little very, very specific things. So
mm,
most people, again, through no fault of their own, have never been told, oh, you have backside mechanics, we need to get you front side, we need to get you striking back behind your hips, we need to get your hip lift there. Like all these little things that we talk about on a daily basis,
mhm,
they've never been told that.
mm,
So it's really cool because most people come to us and they've been told for probably years, like, you need to be faster, you need to be faster, you need to be faster. And then they go out there and they work harder and they run more and they do more sprints and they don't get faster because that's not how you get
right.
faster. And they come to us. And so it's really eye opening to be like, oh, so I need to work on getting my hips forward and then pushing backwards. And so the drills
Mm,
to get faster are actually much more simple and not as exhausting. You don't have to work as hard, not like the hustle. You just have to work a little bit differently. So I think that's one big one.
mhm,
And then another challenge that some people are going to face, because we do get athletes who are very excited to work hard, and overtraining is a normal thing, and
yeah.
some of them like it. Some of them want to overtrain. So telling someone to slow down and to focus, like, I'm literally looking at the bottom of your foot and how you strike the ground. I don't care about how fast you run. I don't care how far you did. I don't actually want you to do very many reps. I want you to do 3 reps perfectly.
Mm,
And so asking them to slow down when they're like, I'm ready to work, I'm ready to
yeah,
go. And it's like, no, this is how we go here.
yeah,
So
yeah.
sometimes it's a little shift of how we think when we're working on improving skills and how you move.
Yeah, I can. It's funny what you said about people when people say get faster. That's such a very common phrase, and it's like, well, what does that look like? What does that mean? How do I do that? And I'll be honest with you. as someone that's in your field, my biggest thing is my athletes do it because I ask them, but me personally for stretching, I don't stretch enough, and I know I should stretch more, and it's like this total mental block. That's why I was so curious when someone on your end is like really diving in, what they struggle with, because I feel like I would struggle with like just yeah slowing down actually, like that would be a pretty hard thing for me to do is just slow down and relax and just kind of like take it one step at a time. But I can see what you're saying by the details because that is at the end of the day what it comes down to.
Hmm. Really, our goal is more of like change movement patterns or enhance
Mm,
movement patterns depending on who they are and how much they need it. The byproduct is speed. The byproduct is injury prevention. Like there's obviously
mhm.
more things that go into it. The byproduct is confidence, but it's like we're changing movement patterns. I want to teach you how to move. That's the big thing.
I love it. Okay, so I'm getting early in on this, but I was so excited to ask this question. Okay, so from your experience, okay, I've heard this phrase so many times, and then I actually stopped using it because I did some research. Fast twitch muscles versus neuroconnectivity to the muscle, or is it both? Because so I've heard a lot of people like use a phrase, we're doing this to create fast twitch muscles. And then I was like, but what is that? What is that? Is that actually a real thing? Is it just someone who like a common phrase that people use and now it's like overused and people just say it to make it sound like they know what they're talking about maybe sometimes. So I'm curious, like someone who this is your field, like the research I've done is that it's more of a neuroconnectivity to the muscle on firing, and then like there is that fast twitch, but like I don't. I'm curious when I ask that question to you, like how would someone like how would you, from an expert standpoint, answer that question?
Mhm. Well, first of all, I am not an exercise physiology specialist by any means. That one,
Okay,
that
okay.
one was always much tougher for me. But when we talk about fast twitch muscles, it's actually a fast twitch muscle fiber type. So
Mm,
you're born with X amount of fast twitch and slow twitch fiber types, and we
okay,
can't change that, but we can train to recruit it, kind of like what you're saying. So I
okay.
think what you're saying is on track. So when you, my biggest pet peeve is off season. Sometimes soccer coaches will say, "Go jog a mile." And I'm like,
Hmm.
"Oh my God, don't go run a mile every day," because you're training to recruit your slow twitch fiber types. You don't run like that in a soccer game. What you
Mm,
need to do is you can cover the distance of a mile, but you need to do bursts, right? So recruiting those fast twitch fiber types. So burst and then jog and then walk and then sprint and then walk and then sprint and then jog. Like just make it kind of chaotic like a
hmm.
soccer game is.
Yeah.
So you're training to recruit the fast twitch muscle fiber types. So you can improve where you're at, but I mean, like the nature of your body, most people are going to find that if they've always been better at outrunning everybody, 2, 3 miles, that's probably they're more just naturally a slow twitch muscle fiber type. Where
Mm.
someone like myself, I get tired jogging one lap around the track, 400 meters, but like I'll run, 2100s in a day. I like sprinting. I like the fast twitch stuff. I think that's
Mhm.
more naturally who I am.
So you brought up a good a point. So when people, so soccer specifically, so
Mhm.
would you say that it's like off season you, or let's say preseason actually. So let's say like for club we are almost 12, we're actually 10 months out of the year. So we have a
Mhm.
2 months off typically.
Mhm.
When they come back, just to get them like endurance back up, would you say doing a mile or two, depending on the age and that kind of stuff, is okay to start with, but then obviously you want to progress more into? Look, you're already shaking your head. I love it. Okay, so so like, so let's okay. So I'll give you the formula. So we're off June, July. We come back August. Our
Mhm.
first match is going to be like sometime in like late August.
Mhm.
So are we doing more sprinting versus any kind of like miles or 2 miles?
Yes, correct. More
Ooh.
sprinting versus mile or 2 miles. So again, I agree that's the time, right? There is a fitness component to soccer,
Hmm.
and your short off season before August is the time to get fit. But getting soccer fit
Hmm.
is not running to 1, 3 miles, whatever. That's not soccer fit. To get soccer fit, it is going to be things more like the beep test or the
Oh,
paper
love it.
test.
Love the beep test.
Yeah,
Love the
yeah.
beep test.
Uh, right? And it doesn't have to be something so structured and programmed like the beep test. It can be anything. It can even be longer stuff because sometimes you do need to run longer. So you can get out on the track and run a 400 somewhat fast and
Hmm.
then break and then run a 200 or run some 50s or like it doesn't have to be super structured, but you have to move fast. That's the thing, is there needs to be a response to your cardiovascular system, but you have to run fast if you want to be able to run fast on a soccer field. What is highly underrated is in order to get fit for soccer,
Hmm.
you have to play soccer games. Like just doing that.
No. Okay.
Right. People forget that sometimes you can do that. Sometimes that makes you fit.
Hmm. It's funny because like what I've done over the years, I've been coaching now for about 15 years. Is I try to look at more like what's actually what are they actually doing. So for
Yeah.
example, like doing quote unquote fitness that involves the actual movement of like what I'm asking them to do on the field. So like if I'm asking them to open up when we're in possession, that movement of opening the hips up and checking your shoulder and moving and going like lateral versus like just forward, right? Like
Mhm.
runs are very rarely forward unless you're playing more direct or so to speak, but you're still running like across, you're running actually out and your hip mobility. So it's interesting that you say that because I started to do a little bit more training that involved the actual replication of what I'm
Love it.
asking them to do. I will admit I have been asking my older girls to run a little bit more recently in terms of the miles, but they also incorporate sprinting the next part of the practice. So like we do a mile or two, but then like we do training on the ball, and then we do some sprints with like some beep test segmented type stuff in between. So, but maybe I'll start to taper down that mile or two and do a little bit more of the bursting.
Yeah.
So no,
I
I like it. No, I like it because it's even for myself. It's good to hear like the different experiences and like what you've seen actually really be more beneficial, right?
Yeah, but I love that you added in, it's not just straight line running. And people
Mm,
think about that with conditioning too. And honestly, a huge part is being able to stop and go. So whether we're talking about the actual change of direction or whether we're talking about it's a lot harder to accelerate when you're tired
mm,
versus just continue on in top end speed.
mm,
So that the response part or even just injury prevention, right? That's a turning and cutting is a very dangerous move. And so,
mm-hmm.
in order to prevent injury, we need to get stronger in those positions. If you just run forward, you're going to hurt yourself whenever you try to cut or whenever you jump and you land incorrectly. You got to be ready to do all those things when you're tired on a soccer field.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So like we do our dynamic warm up
Hmm.
and I incorporate. Forgive me for like not having the actual like name of it, but it's where
I pick it all up.
you're like off beat on your feet, and then when you're ready, you jump out onto one of the balls of your feet and you land and stick it to where you're almost getting your joints around your ankle, knee, hip,
Mhm.
all kind of like warmed up. Then you jump back and then you go to the other one, boom, and you land and you stick it. And the reason why I started doing that even more is because of the ACL injuries that are just unfortunately skyrocketing, which I'm sure there's a lot of different, reasons as to that in terms of like my next question actually. But um, and then we do like sprinting where they're facing like sideways and then they have to open their hip up and then like turn and go from there. And then also a big thing I do is I'm really big into chopping their feet. So say like the finish line is 10 yards, as they get past that, instead of just like stopping or like say turning out, I want them like to
Mhm.
chop their feet to slow down so they don't risk like turning and then maybe like accidentally like tweaking something. Um, is there anything that like is a simple like this in terms of like anything that I just talked about with like a warm up that would be very beneficial with just say overall injury prevention?
Mhm. I would say the biggest thing I don't actually want to say that. That's so black and white. I hate
Yeah,
black and
yeah,
white. So
I'm with
just
you.
okay.
I'm with you.
One of
Yeah.
one of my favorite things, and you talked about like where they're jumping out and landing on one foot.
Uh huh.
So I just call that landing mechanics.
Okay, cool. All
Being
right, I'll
able
use that.
to Yeah, landing mechanics. And there's a million ways you could do it. You could just start tall and chop down. You could jump and land. You could jump and turn. You could land on one leg to the left. Like there's a million ways you can do them,
Hmm.
and you should do them all. Like you should move in multiple directions. You should be in funny positions. You can jump, have someone push you, and then need to land because it's going to happen in a game. So being able to land, but even before that, waking up different stabilizer muscles. So your feet, your
Mm.
ankles, your knees, your hips, your spine, your core, all of that stuff needs to be slowly woken up. It needs to be touched, just like, hey, we're about to do these things today. Are
Yeah.
we ready?
Hmm.
Um, and then bringing it into more, and the landing mechanics is a relatively simple drill, but it's just so, so important. And
Hmm.
then moving different directions, making sure we go fast, making sure we decelerate. I don't know how much of a fan I am about the chop down after the sprint.
Okay.
They'll have to do it. They'll have to do it. So I like that they do it. And if that's the only deceleration that you do in a warm up, I would say, yes, go ahead and do it.
Okay.
I would probably add in more deceleration and change of direction stuff. And when
Mm.
I say change of direction, I don't just mean we're facing this way and then we turn and sprint. I mean, stop, go another way, stop, go another way. So the deceleration, stopping, landing, that is the most dangerous part of a soccer game where people get injured, whether it's overtime, you've done too
Hmm.
much,
Hmm.
or one bad step. So that needs to be touched. So again, if the sprint and then slam on the brakes is the only deceleration that they're doing, at least they warmed it up. I'm cool with that. My problem with slamming on the brakes too many times is that they have such a heavy load already.
Right.
And it's like, do
Okay.
we need to slam on the brakes all the time? Again, I don't feel like if I saw you do it, I wouldn't come up and be like, what are you doing? Like I would never say that. Um, Probably not my first choice for deceleration.
Okay. So for example, like something I could tweak is they do like a 10-yard sprint, they decelerate, and then as you say, stop. So stop and then now change direction, whether it's like to like the 6 o'clock or say like 9 o'clock, like something like that.
Yeah, I would probably have a little bit more intention with it, just like you're saying. So it could even be sprint out 5 yards, but they
Hmm.
know that they're coming to a single leg stop. So at the end, it's like right,
Mm.
left, right. And then you're ending on that one leg. And then from
Okay.
there, you're almost in kind of like almost a lunge position. And then they turn and run out 90 degrees to their left. So now they've worked
Mm.
on like a hard 1, 2, 3 stop and then a hard turn and go. So it's just a little bit more intentional, but it has both of those aspects of stop, of go. There's a little change of direction in there.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I love it. Okay, so kind of we talked about a little bit of it, but what's your take on grass surfaces versus artificial turf in relation to training on them and competing on them from an injury standpoint? Because I'm not sure, like Zlatan, like when he came from Europe to the US, he would not play on a turf field. Same thing with Messi recently. People who don't really know too much about it, Atlanta has a turf field in MLS, and Messi didn't travel with a team to go play, and it's because he won't play on turf. And so, what I think is interesting is that these are athletes at the highest level, and so they're probably getting some people with stats or something like that, and they're like, the chance of you doing something, especially Zlatan, who had a prior injury at Manchester United, actually on grass field though, was just like, don't do it. So like, what are your thoughts on just in terms of the grass versus the artificial?
It's so tough because we're talking to youth athletes and we just don't have the same resources. I
Hmm.
don't I don't have the money Messi does. That's for sure. Right? So to put hundreds of kids in cleats on a field every single day, it's impossible to keep up with those fields. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been on so many soccer fields that go through just a week of training and
Mm-hmm.
they're so beat up that I'm worried about their ankles on the grass field too because there's holes everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like although in a perfect world we could put them on this nicely manicured lawn, it's just at a youth level, even at a high youth level, whether we're talking ECNL, GA, whatever it is, it's unrealistic because there's so many bodies and they're training so many hours. And
Mm-hmm.
then that practice gets over and the next one comes in. And then that practice gets over and the next one comes in. So there's so much evidence. I don't have the numbers up in my head, but
Yeah.
there's so much evidence showing that artificial turf is so much more dangerous. You don't have, it doesn't give, right? So if you get your cleat caught in it, It's going to
Mhm.
keep you there and your knee's going to give instead of the grass giving. On the other hand, the grass giving over and over and over and over creates a not very good surface.
Mhm.
So like at the youth level, I don't know how you could even make that decision because it's like turf is so simple. It's going to last, it's going to
Mhm.
be there, even though it's dangerous. Whenever we're talking about Messi, I think Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles on turf as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're actually trying to turn all of the
Yeah.
NFL fields
And
into
it's
grass.
ridiculous. So now talking at that level, I'm like, I can't believe that they haven't already done it. It's been
Hmm.
outrageous. J.K. Dobbins tore his Achilles the same day. I think he was on grass, but I'm not sure. But every single time there's a torn ACL or something on turf at the NFL level, it just blows my mind
Hmm.
because why would there be turf there? But again, we're not at the NFL level. We're not
Yeah.
Messi. We don't really get to have the same, and we don't have the same weight writing on our games, you know? So it's tough. I don't know. I'm glad I'm not the one in charge of making those decisions.
So what are your thoughts on then like the footwear? So let's say you are training on turf. Would you rather someone wear those turf cleats or actual cleats on turf?
I really don't actually know that much about the turf cleats, and I imagine there's different types of turf and different types of cleats are for that. Generally speaking, I have different opinions on footwear. I think that everyone at times needs to get completely out of their foot and train barefoot. I think that on a day
Mm.
to day, like walk around barefoot, we need to build that. However, whenever you're training change of direction, put your cleats on, get ready like you would in a soccer game, right? So if you're on turf, I don't want you in tennis shoes. Well, I mean, depending on what you're doing, right? If we're
Hmm.
doing change of direction drills, we're moving at a fast pace. You can't be in just normal tennis shoes. You can't be barefoot. Put something on that's going to be more game structured. I would
Hmm.
need to know more about the turf cleats, but some sort of cleat.
Yeah, I mean it's so I actually wear them and they're I mean I'm not doing obviously what my players are doing.
Mhm,
But they're pretty much like little rubber nubs that are like
mhm.
maybe like a quarter inch like off the sole. Um and I've actually been around a grass field where because they want to preserve the grass, they ask the players to wear turf cleats, which again, it's like that little quarter rubber, nub is not gonna help exactly. I see you're shaking your head. You're like, no, like. So it's interesting to the footwear part of it because like we train mainly on turf, and so we all my players have turf shoes, those little rubber nubs. Um,
Yeah.
and also the turf is like 10, 12 years old, so it's like super like it's just like it's almost like cement sometimes. I
Oh,
mean, yeah, it's just it's really hard. I mean, there's not a lot
yeah.
of like you said, there's not a lot of give. So yeah, there's a lot to do with that too. Because then on the weekend, someone wear cleats, so it's like you're training on your nub of a quarter, and then you're wearing cleats. So I'm sure that changes the mechanics, right? Of like your alignment, how you move a little bit, maybe. And I know we're
Yeah.
getting to the weeds of it all, but like,
Right,
I
and these are the weeds that I'm not as familiar with. So
yeah.
it's hard for me to say, but just based off of what you're saying, again, I don't wear turf shoes, so
Hmm.
I don't know how it feels. I haven't seen the stats on that. I'm not sure what the numbers say, but what I like about it is that right, you're not holding on to it. So practice is not the time to tear an ACL ever,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So you're
Yes.
minimizing the risk of injury in practice. So I like that the bulk of what they're doing is a little bit safer, even if they might slip a little bit more than they would if they were wearing real cleats, or
Hmm.
even if they're not training 100% like they would in a field. So I do like that aspect because they're on, they need something to hold them. They need some
Hmm.
footwear and they are on turf and we can't change those two factors. So we might as well be a little bit safer. I would say maybe every once in a while, even like the day before a game. I don't know what you guys if you guys have practice, but like an easy day, more of like a walkthrough type day. Like, okay,
Hmm.
let's put our cleats on, let's just get prepped, let's kick a ball around, let's do some simple drills. It's not a lot of contact, it's not a lot of volume, simpler things in the cleats, just to be a little
Got
bit
it.
safer. But again, I would need to see more numbers on that.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Kind of a follow question to that with the ACLs. So I get like this topic kind of like is close to home. I haven't personally, knock on wood, have had any ACLs, but obviously for coaching for many years, I've had unfortunately a few people who have had them. From my limited exposure to it, though, is the quad gets overdeveloped and then the hamstring gets underdeveloped. And then as you're asking the player, this is for non-contact, not contact.
Mhm.
As you're trying to change or you misstep, the quad is like overpowering essentially that wheelhouse area of your leg. And so there's like a disconnect between your hamstring and your quad. And so like from what I've studied or have been exposed to is that athletes who are doing dominant, like say running sports, their
Mhm.
quads are obviously, because you're pushing off, so your quads constantly getting that motion. Is hamstring development like one of the big things you would say that people should be also working on then outside of, because like I think a little bit what it sounds like to be coaching multiple teams from say a soccer standpoint, and so players who are taking that extra step to get better or ready for that next level to help prevent ACLs non-contact, would you say hamstring glute development is like big time, or is it other things that I'm not aware of that also should be doing as well?
Right, well, both. I think that the posterior chain in general, so back, glute, hamstrings, like
Hmm.
that's all really important in if you want to be fast, but then
Right.
also if you want to be, strong and make sure that we're a little bit balanced. There are more things. So my thing is really making sure that they're doing the moves correctly,
Hmm.
that they're stopping correctly, that they've done stopping movements. Um, I recently had a video on Facebook actually get a lot of attraction, and it just hit the wrong audience. It totally hit the wrong audience. It was all older people with like no athletes, and they're just so mean. They're
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's okay. They were so mean. But everyone was like, oh my god, that's so bad for your knees. Oh my god, your knee's gonna whatever. Like, oh my god, like they just had so many horrible things to say. And it's like, I mean, I didn't say this exercise was good for your knees. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
if you're gonna go play a sport like soccer, it's not we know soccer is not a safe thing to do, right? We're not
Right.
doing it because it's the safe way to exercise. We're
Hmm.
doing it because you're a soccer player. So you have to train some dangerous stuff. Is that the first thing that you should do? No, there's a lot of steps that you need to do to take before that level,
Hmm.
but you have to do some things that put you in that position that you're going to be tested on the field.
Hmm.
So doing like just doing deceleration, doing stability, making sure that we're strong, making sure that um we're built from the inside out too. People think that strong means how much can you squat, and that's almost never what I mean. I don't really care how
Mm.
much you can squat. Strong is about like the inside of the knee, and it's not just muscles, but it's tissues and tendons and ligaments, because that is what we want to make sure is ready to take a hit on the field.
Right. No, I mean, you, to your credit, one thing I admire about you, Laura, is and again, I met you through social media. So, your work rate of your content is unbelievable. Like you are pumping out, as they say, like you are pumping out material like all the time. But I actually like, I've seen a few of them recently with the soccer stuff, with like the lateral movement and the change of direction to like, and so like I appreciate it. So I think it's like you said, the audience of people who are looking at it, it's like, from what standpoint are you looking at it to? And also, like you said, open mindedness. Like if you're not open minded, like there's no point, because all you're gonna do is judge and you're not gonna ask
Right.
questions. Like I would just be like, oh, why, how come, how long, what type, like. So I'm sorry you received that
No,
little bit, but
it's okay. I appreciate the kind words, and I'm happy that you find value, because I don't know where they all came from. It was
must have been a bad streaming day. Must have been a bad
yeah,
algorithm or something like that going
it
on
was a
that day.
bad streaming day.
Um, okay, so spine players. So I was a spine player. I was not a winger. So
Okay.
spine players like Busquets that just really got to have really good 2 3 steps. Like
Okay.
they're not being asked to make that 30 40 yard sprint, right? Maybe occasionally, maybe like a couple times, but not like wingers.
Hmm.
So spine players on average, I would say, tend to be the they don't be the fastest players, spine players. They're usually like kind of like in the middle. Because like for example,
Okay.
when I get a brand new group of players, for me to put a player who has more slow twitch muscles, say in the middle of the field, yeah, maybe when they're young, it's good to do both so they can learn the different positions. But I know long term where their value is going to be able to sustain playing at certain levels. So, like
Mm-hmm.
for myself, I played like in the middle. Um, I was on the wings. So, what can those players do to really help those like first two or three steps that play those positions? Because the game, the game, in my opinion, has evolved more to IQ. So, like Stanford, the
Mm-hmm.
women's program, like they are more about, do you know what space you should be in? You don't need to run over here to stay in a pocket, and we're gonna pass the ball because our IQ of how to do this is higher. There's more value now, um, from that point of view. So players who are listening, who are those spine players, who they're the ones being told you gotta be faster, and it's like, but that's not their strong suit. But how can they put themselves in a position to like, either it's to shield right away or to open up just those hip movements, 2 3 steps, like what exercises, or is it something that they can see to help them get that 1 or 2 step just a little bit quicker in those tight spaces?
Yeah. So you're talking about acceleration here. And
Mm,
that's what it comes back to, is understanding how to actually accelerate. So
mm,
I don't know what each individual problem is.
right.
I see a lot of people whose we talk about hip projection. Well, actually, you know what? Let me just go ahead and tell you our 4 pillars of running. This is really
I
where
would,
we start.
let's go, let's
so
go.
so when we start with an athlete, we're looking at 4 things that are kind of our pillars, right? There's obviously going to be more pieces to this,
Hmm.
but when you have an understanding, this is a good starting point for being able to look at yourself on video and be like, oh, okay, well, this needs some work here.
Mm,
So, one is spinal alignment, which obviously your spine is straight, which we know that, like, bad posture or whatever. But what a lot of people don't know is your neck and your tailbone is going to be included in your spine. So, if your
mm,
hips are tucked under, if your head's up, that head up is pulling you up. You're not having the same horizontal displacement, which we
mm.
want whenever we sprint forward. We want that horizontal movement. So that's spinal alignment. Number 2 is hip projection. So we're getting our hips to cover ground, to move, right? We need our hips moving. I see so many times people start running, and especially youth soccer players, they bend at the waist and they lean forward. But now your hips aren't moving, and so your butt's back there and your chest is over here, but you're not going anywhere. We got to
Hmm.
get the ground moving backwards. Pushed around backwards gets your hips moving. So hip projection
Okay.
is a big one. Now, the next one is switch, which is how you switch from left to right. We do not
Mm,
want to step. We want to switch on time. We want to be fast when we switch, not like a bound where we're pausing, but we want to be fast without losing range of motion. So we don't want these little like boop, 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 boop. We want full strides without losing time.
got it.
And then the last one is stiffness, so full body stiffness. And what I
Mm.
like to compare is a lacrosse ball versus a ball of socks. So if I have a lacrosse ball in my hands and I throw it up, oh, let's start with the ball of socks. If I have a ball of socks in my hands and I throw it on the ground, it's gonna collapse. It's gonna fall onto the ground.
This
It's
is a
not.
great analogy, by the way. This is a
Yeah, it's
great
so
analogy.
fun. And then the lacrosse ball, you throw it on the ground, it hits the ground, it's strong, it's stiff, and it bounces up. And a lot of people are like, you don't want to be stiff. You need to stretch. You need to loosen up your muscles. And I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about. That's, you want that lacrosse ball bounce, right? So we want to be nice and
Mm,
strong. We do not want to collapse into the ground. So going and kind of taking a critical look at like, okay, let's knowing these 4 pillars, where can I start? So
got
if
it.
you have a problem where your hips are staying back, we talked about hip projection. Going and sprinting more is probably not going to fix your problem with hip projection. You're
Mm,
just going to get better at moving with your hips back here.
got
So
it.
understanding how to get your foot in the ground and project your hips and shoulders forward is what you need to do. You're going to do that
Mm,
by slowing movement down, by understanding what I'm talking about, by thinking about foot placement, maybe wrap a band around your hips so you can feel the external force, whether you're pulling or not.
hmm.
Check, watch your videos, check those things. It's about slowing it down and understanding what the problem is. We kind of like to talk about like the diagnosis, right? This is the
Right, right.
diagnosis, your hip projection. Now prescribe drills that match those problems.
I did notice that on your website, which so I'm a huge film buff. All the teams I coach, we actually do film sessions at the youth level.
Nice. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Um, I'm all about IQ. That's like my biggest thing with
Yeah.
soccer players. So I noticed that on your website that you do a lot of film breakdown and you have them watching themselves. I think it's so valuable. Did you always do that with your athletes, or did it like come over time? Did you like think like, oh, like technology is now able for me to do this, or did you always know you wanted to do that, or you wanted them to see themselves, or how did that come about?
I've always done it to an extent, but
Mm,
again, with my background, especially coming out of college, I went right into like NFL combine. I was
mhm,
working with that and I could see it. So
mm,
it's like I wanted to incorporate it. When I was working in person, especially with groups, it was hard because they only had an hour. And so even if it's just me and you and we can be really, efficient in this hour, sit down and talk for 15 minutes about where your foot is, that leaves 45 minutes for the warm up, for the actual stuff, for the drill, like everything. So I didn't get to do a lot of that in person. Now take a group of 5 to 10 people, 60, no way. But even
yeah.
a smaller group of 5 to 10, it's I'd be able to, especially if I had, an assistant coach with me in the group, I'd be able to be like, okay, you keep leading them. I'm going to pull them one by one. And we're going to do a
Mhm,
30-second film session. It was so helpful with just 30 seconds. It
mhm,
was great, but not until I switched to this online model where it's like, okay, well, we have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week now. So
mhm.
we're in no rush. Now I need you to send these films or these videos and we need to be talking about this. We need to have a discussion. And I'm not just going to tell you what's going on. I'm going to say, okay, Michael, using our 4 pillars of running, using the vocab you've learned, tell us
Mhm.
what you see. I'm going to throw you under the bus. We're going to guide you. We're going to make sure you get there, but I want you understanding because I'm not always here to hold your hand.
So to pick on myself, one of my players, one of my yeah, she's one of my top players. She actually made fun of me the other day when I was running. So it's funny we're
Oh,
having this conversation about
oh,
running.
let's have a video. Let's go.
I mean, to be honest, I probably don't want to see a video from what she said. And
Great.
what's funny was when we were playing, I didn't remember what she said, and it bugged me because like I'm competitive like that. And so actually the next day I was like, "Hey, you said something while I was running. What did you call me?" Because she called me something, and I was just like, "What did you say?" And she said, "You look like a Lego man."
Oh
So
my
that
god,
tells me that I'm running stiff as can be.
that
That's
sounds pretty stiff. Like you got no bend in your knees or elbows. You just,
yeah.
yeah, that sounds,
It sounds like some work that needs to be done in
yeah,
multiple
that
facets.
fluidity. You're very rigid.
Yeah, yeah. No,
She's
I
funny.
yeah.
Tell her to come work for me. Lego man.
Oh no, she yeah, I try to create once they're ready for like that competitive edge of like how they talk and think and
Yeah.
like I really push more than just the fundamental just technical stuff. Like it's so you have your 4 pillars. I use the acronym TIPS for coaching
Mhm.
soccer. So it's technical, insight, personality, speed. Um
Nice.
so it's the for me it's the I and the P that are like the separators because technical a lot like if you Google right now like personal trainers like you're gonna find thousands of people who are gonna help you with technical ability, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, cool, check mark, done. But
Mm-hmm.
like sitting down watching yourself or watching high level games, breaking it down, understanding the decisions of like, and the way I do it for an analogy is if you're watching something and it's not great, what do? Well, you change the channel. So
Yeah.
if it's rhythmic of what you're watching and you're excited and it's really good decisions, then you're gonna keep watching it because you're excited for the next thing that's gonna happen. So I tell them the same thing. Like if you're not entertaining people by making really good decisions and it's like stop and go with like passing and losing and passing and losing. It's like so and then the last thing, the speed is actually not necessarily speed of like athleticism, but speed of thought, speed of the technical ability to
Yes.
see the ball,
There's
play
so
a
much
ball.
more.
So um it sounds like what you do, which is why I related to your work, is that you check off all these boxes. It's not just one thing. And you mentioned it earlier about like black and white. Like I agree with you. Like for someone to say, "Hey, how do I become a great soccer player?" It's like, well, how much time do you got? Because I can talk to you for hours about how to get there. But um, so going back to your field, I love this question because I wish someone would ask me, but like, what's one of the biggest misconceptions related to your field of expertise? Like, what's a phrase that you've heard so many times out there while you're walking by or you hear someone training that you're like, no, like, and not in like an arrogant way, but more just like, I've studied this, I have experience, I had, like you've been at the highest levels with like professional athletes, and now you're working with like the youth that are trying to get to that level.
Yeah.
What are some phrases that you're just like, or things that you see that you're like, no, please stop doing that? Like,
Yeah, I like that. There's so many. There's so
give me
many.
a few. Give me a
I
few.
think the two that pop up in my head first is the hustle mentality again. Or
Mm,
sometimes if I'm at a park and I see someone personal training, and not soccer skills because I don't know that, right? I'm gonna leave that alone. But when someone's training and working on things that I work on, and I know the drills that you're doing, but I can't understand the goal of the session. Number one, I should have, right? If I haven't talked to the person, I can't say. I don't know that it's a bad session because I don't know what your thought is. I don't know who that athlete is.
mhm,
That's your thing. But typically, I feel like I should be able to look at a session and have some understanding of the flow and what's going on because I'm familiar with each little thing that you're doing. But the way that it's put together doesn't make any sense. And again, going back to that like grind and hustle mentality, sometimes people just they want to work, they want to feel like they sweat and they did something and they got better, and it's like, but did you get better? Because you
mm,
work hard every day. You play competitive soccer. I'm not worried about you working hard. I'm working worried about, are you strengthening the pieces that you need the most?
mhm,
So again, if I'm walking by somebody, see somebody at a park, I don't know that athlete. I don't know what they need the most. I don't know that trainer. I don't know what they had planned that day. But how often I see something that I'm just like, what's going on is
mhm,
kind of a red flag. It's like there should be a little bit of rhyme and reason there.
mhm,
Now, the second one, again, I don't know the people, I don't know how you communicate, but my communication style is never going to be yelling at someone because I know that I've never learned by being yelled at. I'm going to learn a much different way. And it's not just because of who I am or how I grew up or whatever, it's because I'm a human. And so I see some people that they yell, and sometimes you see it in football culture. You see a lot in football culture, but it's like those are humans. They don't need to be yelled at. Sometimes you see it with the dad who's out there with his 7-year-old son, and then he does the drill really fast, and he gets mad at his son who's not doing it well. I'm like, well, first of all, why are we doing this drill? Second of all, you see the way you're talking to him? You're just hurt. You're hurting. You're it's you're not helping him train, and I'm not a parent, so I can't say for sure, but I imagine because I know my relationship with my parents and how things have been hurt. I imagine you're not helping your relationship.
mhm.
So it's just the way that you talk to people, and I don't care if you're an authority figure as a coach or a parent or whatever. Just remember that those are humans. And if you're
Well said.
there, yeah, if you're there with their like you're trying to help them and you really have good intentions, maybe a little bit more communication and understanding where those kids are at is going to go a long ways because it's just a person. Like it's a
Mhm,
person. So
mhm.
just check yourself. Are you there for yourself as a coach and a parent, or are you there for the kid and are you really wanting them to get better?
Someone asked me the other day for advice on coaching, and I was like, "That's a big question because there's a lot to talk about
Right.
there." But I touched on what you just touched on, and I said, "Just talk." I go,
Just
don't yell,
listen.
like, just talk, just like literally just talk to them, like whether you're coaching 8 year olds, 9 year olds, 14, doesn't matter. Just talk to them, and then trust me, they're gonna be like, "Oh wow, he didn't like he still gave me correction, but like he just talked to me calmly." And so I think it's so hard. We all have our own personal experiences, but I think the biggest thing for me too is I also ask like, what is the goal of this athlete that I'm dealing with right now? And
Right.
are they wanting to be a professional soccer player? Maybe, maybe not. And as well as I do how many can reach it at that level. I just watched Tom Brady's interview. I'm not sure if you saw it on it's on Valuetainment. I forget the gentleman's name who runs
See
the
the whole thing,
podcast.
but there's so many clips going everywhere.
It's like it's the first time that you've seen Tom just like talk, and he literally went on like 15-minute tangents, and like even the guy who was doing the interview was like, "What's up with you, dude? Like you're so calm, and you're just like," and Tom was
Right.
just like, I'm grateful for all the people that have helped me get to where I am today. And like, you can just tell that he just was just giving all this information out. And so my point though with him is that he wanted to like get to where he wanted to get. And so it's actually when you're dealing with someone who doesn't want to get there and then you're screaming at them and yelling at them, it's like, what's the point? Like it's, you know what I mean? And even if they want to get there, it's like,
That's
that's not going to
it.
help them get there. Like it's just, so I go back to what you said. Like I relate very much to that. And also I'll be honest, like my first 5 years of coaching, like was awful, like awful. Like, cause, but no one, I blame myself first, but like no one was mentoring me to be like, hey, Mike, just calm down. And then
Yeah,
not until
right.
I was 6 years in did someone who coached internationally pull me aside and literally was like, just relax, just
Right.
take it. And I was
Right.
just like, I looked at him like, are you sure? And like he's just like, yeah, man, just chill out. And I was just like, so it's yeah, I relate to you very much with that because now, especially like even last night, my 9-year-old boys that I coach, like I just talk to them. Like if a mistake happens, it's like, hey, just work on this. Okay, let's go. Come on to the next thing. Like short-term memory. Let's go. Like
And
so
maybe sometimes we gotta cut it for the day, right? Like maybe we're just gonna
yeah.
in that area. That's okay. Let's move on.
Mhm.
Yeah. A big part of communication too, which people don't understand, especially in the role that we are as a coach, listen. Listen is probably a bigger part of communicating. And if you give your athletes skin in the game, and I don't care what age they are, right? At 15 to 18 years old, you can give them a little bit more skin in the game. You
Mhm.
can actually have them decide things. They're going to work so much harder for you. And if you're smart about it, you can have them decide exactly what you want them to decide.
Mhm.
But letting them voice their opinions and letting them have that skin in the game, it's like that's a community that you're creating that no words are going to do. So if you listen, if you care, if you give them a voice, it's going to go so far. It's gonna go so far. And then even on the other side of things, sometimes they're being kids. And sometimes you get a whole bunch of girls that have been in school all day and they just want to talk and they're being annoying, right? And sometimes you got to yell and let them know that it's time to focus. But if you put your different tone of voice on, they take it seriously. Whereas if I'm yelling all the
Mhm.
time, like, okay, coach is just yelling again, like she's always mad at us. They're not doing
Mhm.
anything wrong. They're just being 15-year-old girls. That's what they do. Like it's part of it. So
S-
knowing when to use that voice and not, it's really big. It's really big part.
Yeah, it's like man management. Like that's like a really difficult thing for I think a lot of people. And back to what you said about listening. So I coach 9-year-olds, boys, super competitive,
Yeah.
and two of them, mainly one of them, but yeah, both of them can, but mainly one, they can't tie their shoes, and it just every practice they'd be like, "Hey, coach, can you tie my shoe?" And so the first two times I did it, but
Yeah.
after the third time I was like, "No," because what I'm hearing is that you're telling me you can't tie your shoe. You're playing soccer. You're 9. It's like, come on, man. Like this is like you have to put cleats on. You gotta be able to tie your shoes. And so you're gonna love this, Laura. So we train my two teams. We train 4 days a week. So we train
Mhm.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on the field, and Thursday we do film sessions. On Tuesday, the boys showed up. I had them all sit down. And I said, "Take off your shoes," and they all looked at me like, "What is this guy doing?" And I'm like, "Take off your shoes." They all take off their shoes, and I'm like, "We're gonna learn how to tie our shoelaces." And you know why? I'm sure you've heard John Wooden. He's a legend for UCLA basketball. But like one of the biggest things he did was teach his players at college is how to tie their shoes and to not get blisters by wearing their socks a certain way. This, and that. So that sparked my oh, you should do this. But like, what was funny was it took one of the players 25 minutes to do it, and the boys were laughing. They're having a good time. So it goes back to like, yeah, listen and just talk and just like, yes, we're there to do soccer, but it's also like just it's enjoying yourself too. You gotta have fun while you do it. Like if you're not enjoying yourself, like
Right.
you
Well, and
know,
what that shows me is that you love that kid. And
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
what's important is because like as again, going back to just being humans, like our job is to be loving, right?
yeah.
And so especially if I'm going to be a coach and put myself in this role that right, like I'm authority over you, which I don't 100% believe in, but it's just kind of how things work. So now my job needs to be more loving than if I was your equal, right? Because I need to show you that I love you and that you're equal with me because you don't actually think that we are.
Hmm.
So to just love that kid as opposed to be like, oh my God, you need to like tell your mom to teach you. This is so annoying. You're 9. And then
Hmm.
also knowing the difference between like, okay, if I put the kids down and we spend 30 minutes tying our shoes, is this going to hurt him? Is he going to be embarrassed and upset? And is this going to ruin him? Because maybe we just need to do this after practice, me and him. Or is it a good
Hmm.
moment that we can all have a good time and he's gonna learn and we just, so it's having the situational awareness, but then
Yeah.
also remembering that like your job is to give these kids love. That's part of being a coach.
Okay, so I gotta tell you a story because you just said the word there, and so you will appreciate it. So
Okay.
the boys have been on a little bit of a run. They're like, I think they're 4-0. They're playing really well. Our style is actually very Barca, and it's not common at like 9. You're really focusing on passing. It's a lot more like you're usually working on like technical individual, like 1v1, but we're more about like breaking down. So fast forward, we had practice on Monday. I missed their game because my older girls had a game, so I had a conflict, so I had to do that. And I show up, and so they won their game, so now they're 4-0. And I was like, hey, like one of the boys showed up early. I was like, what do you think is the reason why we're doing so well? Like we're on this streak, which could end, and it's okay if it does. Like you're 9, like no one cares. No one's gonna ask you when you were 9 years old if you won your league. No one cares.
They're
Um,
winning 10-1.
I know exactly. God forbid. Um, so I asked him, I said, what do you think is the reason why we're doing so well? And he literally said one word. He goes, love. And I was just like, I was like, if I retire today, I'm good. I was like, I'm good. Cause
Tired
I was
today.
like, I'm good. I'm like, cause like, but it's so true, which is now I look at to my girls, the girls are at the higher level, the highest level in league. The boys
Yeah.
are at like a decent level. So the difference is the girls are good, but they're so like instead of being in love in the moment, they're almost like intimidated by like being like in this level and like so it's like me figuring out how to depressurize because like they have all this pressure. So the boys are like, we're just having fun, we're loving the game, and the girls are like, we love the game, practices are phenomenal, our games are actually really good, but like we're not enjoying it as much as the boys are. So it's an interesting like being able to sit back and go, like where do you tinker, and
Yeah. It's
yeah.
it's tough because there's not one right way. And actually in that Tom Brady interview, he talked about how anger was such a good thing for him.
Hmm.
And
Oh
that's something
yeah.
that we talk about. Yeah, that's something that we talk about with our athletes is like, okay, let's come up with a list of emotions and then I want you to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. Where are you, at practice, before a game, at the beginning of a game, in the middle of a game? And I'm not saying that any one thing is good. Me, when I'm angry, like I don't do very well. So if me and Tom
Mm.
Brady have our anger scale and we're talking about as the whistle blows, he wants to be a 10 out of 10 angry. That's going to help him perform. I need to be like a 4. Like that's going to help me best.
Mm.
So if he's at a 9, he needs to do something to get to a 10. And if I'm at a 6, I need to drop it back. So it's just understanding like how are your emotions and how do you perform best?
It's interesting. Okay, so there's so many takeaways from the interview, and anyone who's
Yeah.
listening, like, please go listen to that interview. Like, it's unbelievable. I actually listened to it at midnight, and so I stayed until 2 a.m. It was a big problem. I know it was a bad choice because I was so hooked. I was just like, but I love what he talked about with you have to be able to shift. Meaning, when I'm on the field, I'm quarterback Tom Brady.
Hmm.
I'm not thinking about my kids, my wife. Like, I'm not, no, no, no. Like, I'm here to win a football game. But
Hmm.
yes, the minute I'm off the field, then I'm
Hmm.
like the husband and the dad and the son and the friend. And that goes back to the P, the personality, the tips. Like, I say it so many times to my athletes. And so what's so fun is when you hear someone at that level have that conversation I've never been at that level and never will be at that level. But it's like, yeah, you have to be someone. It's just like coaching. Like I'm not who I am with my nieces when I'm with you guys on the soccer field. Like I'm a whole different person. So if I'm doing that as a coach, I have to help you see what that looks like. But to your point, everyone's different. So some people are good in that anger mode. Like one of the boys, I've actually told players like you play better when you're pissed. And there's
Yeah.
other players where it's like you play better when you're calm. So it's so
Exactly.
interesting to your point. Like, yeah, that's like, that's why coaching is, it's difficult because you have to be able to manage all these different people, you
Tough,
know?
it's tough, and then you have the dynamic as one team too, which is its own dynamic, and so how
Oh
does the
yeah.
team perform best? And right, like, maybe we need to be excited, but if we get too excited, then it goes, it's like, yeah, it's tough, it's tough.
So I got one more question before I let you hit me with a question or two. Since you've been around that level, and I've had the pleasure of knowing some current female professional players, in your opinion, what are some of like the physical or non-physical advice to someone who's listening who wants to reach the highest level in their sport? Um, what's your advice? Like just in terms of what does it take to get there? And again, like we just said, it's not black and white. There's multiple factors, but like whether it's physical or non-physical or both, but what are some just like quick fire like to be able to reach this level? Here are some of the like baseline things you have to have.
Yeah, again, there could be so many things, so I'll speak more from a performance standpoint just because that's
Okay.
what I do.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to be healthy, number 1. If
Mm,
you're on the bench, you're not in front of coaches, you're not leveling up. You have to be healthy. And so I want you to double think about how much you're training. And sometimes that means disappointing people. Sometimes people are going to want you working harder or putting in more hours, but you know your body. And so you need to listen because you have got to be healthy. Again, whether that means taking a day off, doing more training like, performance training like I do, or whether that means just being smarter. There's so many ways, but you need to learn that for yourself and you need to be able to say no. And that includes again saying no to your coaches or your parents or uncomfortable people you don't want to say
mhm.
no to, but just trust yourself. And then also when it comes to training, like we opened this with talking about being open and receptive and wanting to learn. Yes, do that. Find people, whether it's a skills coach or performance coach or a team coach or whatever. Find all these people who have done well, be open, be receptive, but also have like a bullshit detector, right? Because not everything's going to be good advice.
Mhm.
And even if it is good advice for you, it might not be good advice for the other person. So just because someone has all the accolades or because they helped these people, you still need to be able to understand what am I looking for as my own individual. So
Mm.
go be open and receptive, do your work, but understand that you have to know who's best for you. And the only person who can do it is you. You're the only person who can decide that.
Mhm. Nah, well said. I mean, the first part, yeah, being healthy, leveling up, and then yeah, picking your voices to listen to and to not listen to. Yeah, no, like that. So I just asked you probably like a dozen questions. So is there anything that's perked in your head as a question or two that you can flip the script on me and then I can maybe answer one or two?
Yeah, nothing super standing out from what we've talked about. But I guess one question that I do have, and it might even be a selfish question, is every time I talk to coaches or I jump on podcasts, everyone's very excited about the work I do. But realistically, as a coach, you only have so many hours in the day or on the field. So,
I
like,
know where this is going.
yeah. So I know that if I said, "Hey, do you want speed and performance training?" you would say yes. How realistically, how does that work? What are you looking for as a coach?
It's a great question. I mean, this could be a whole segment of, I would say, my. So I've been coaching for 15 years. So, um, I've hired trainers to come
Mhm,
to our practices
mhm,
and to do those segments because I am not an expert and I don't want to pretend to be. And I tell my
mhm,
players all the time, like I can give you base knowledge, but so it's almost like when I know that a player that I am coaching is ready,
mhm,
I help them seek out someone who's an expert. So, for example, I am in the frame of mind of you can't become great in isolation. So, you need to be able to branch out. So, for example, like I have a buddy who lives like an hour and a half away, who, in my opinion, is one of the best technical trainers I've ever seen. I'm
mhm.
good, but like he's like, if I had a child, I like
Yeah.
you're like you're training my kid.
Right.
And on the flip side, breaking down film and being able to show you the point of view that I have of the game, that I would say would be my expertise, is breaking down the game, helping you with your IQ of awareness. So back to your original question, it's like I train 4 days a week with my teams. I would literally, if my club allowed it, I would hire someone like you locally and be like, hey, based on their age and like where they're at and whatever day it is and like how their body's feeling, like I want you to put a program together and then work on this with those players. But again, it also goes back to like, well, what are the intentions of those players? What are the intentions of that club? Like, are they really trying to push all these different aspects?
Right.
And it's just different. Every club and every coach is different. Like for me, it's yeah, I would love to have someone like Laura like Stark at my practice and doing like this, you know what I mean? And to be honest with you, like I have players that right now, after having this conversation with you, I'd be like, hey, if you want to take that next step with your physicality of like growth and like understanding your body more, I would like here's someone that I would suggest you work with because again, going back to the pillars, like for me it's tips. So it's are you technically able to move? Like stretching. Like for example, here's my example. Joker for tennis. That guy, if you watch Joker play, aside from just being great all around, right? Like the balls he can save sometimes because of his flexibility. And you can go back to Tom Brady, like he talks about it. And so when you listen to the details of these people, it's like you have to work on every facet of your game. So at the youth level, the struggle is one, having the coach to understand that that's important. One, two, then the resources to provide that. And also like I would say the all inness of like that environment. So to answer your question, yeah, I've hired someone over the years to come to my sessions to do stuff to do this work. I it's a missing piece. I would say your piece and the IQ piece are the two things, in my opinion, that are lacking in at least the soccer world. So again, everyone does training. Everyone does, dribbling and shooting and goalie saving, but like they don't study the game and they
Right.
don't work on their bodies. Um,
Right.
so yeah, it's a lack of I think the leader being comfortable to say, I'm not good at this, but here's someone who is. So yeah, I mean, to roundabout point of view, it's like I have players that are like, yes, I want to be on the women's national team. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, well, so what are you doing to get there? Out of these 4 steps, you have tips, like where are you? Okay. And I can tell you, Laura, like I have a player who since nine, almost every week for an hour, we would do film at 9.
Wow, that's a lot.
And I don't want to bring gender into this, but like she's a female. And like you can see now she's 12, there's a gap between her and some people around her. Not necessarily on her team, but just in general. Like other referees, other coaches, other parents are like, why is she like, how is she able? And I'm like,
Study.
yeah, like she's
Study.
technical, like, yeah, she's
Yeah.
athletic, but like she understands A plus B equals this, and she understands to not do this and this point in the field. So again, the IQ part of it. So like for her, for example, her next step is actually the physical part. Like
Yeah.
once she goes through her body growth, right? She's only 12, so like when she gets to that point, and then starting to work on like her mobility, yes, like, and I've had that conversation about stretching, like being able to like, be able to be flexible, like not be stiff and tight. So yeah, I mean, as people who are enthusiastic about what we do, we see the things that we want to improve on. It's hard bringing it all
Yeah.
together, like it really is.
Right. Especially at that
So
level. Again, have only so many hours a week.
yeah, and again, it comes back to like what you said, like it's up to the person, like how big is their appetite. So that's why I
Hmm.
named what I did soccer appetite, because it's like, what's your appetite? Like
Hmm.
if you're 24/7, then doing mobility and doing film session, that's all like it's like norm. But if you're
Hmm.
1 foot in, 1 foot out, which is okay, like totally fine. But like that's
Right.
also like you're just not gonna then don't wonder why you're not there. And it's like just
Right.
be okay with it. Like understand
Right.
like you're not there yet, and that's okay. So Man, I feel like yeah, there's so much more we can talk about with everything we've discussed so far. But is there anything
Always.
else? Is there anything else that come up, or is that good? I know I gave you a long-winded answer. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I think that that covers it for now.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're really busy again with just all the content you put out, all the people you work with. I know that your time is strapped, so I really do appreciate you taking an hour plus out of your day to help those who listen with maybe asking some questions about themselves, about their body, and if they're putting in the work and what level they want to reach, and if they're not doing those things. I hope that maybe you inspired a few people to be healthy. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here and I appreciate your time as well.
Awesome. Well, hopefully one day there'll be a part two where I actually do it in person. So, but until
Yeah, there
then,
we go.
we're doing the Zoom setup right now. So again, thank you for your time, and I'll definitely be in touch, Laura.
All right. Thanks, Michael.